if we can reconnect people to nature, we have a stronger bond to nature, more emotional attachment, makes it much harder to destroy because we actually start caring for it, and hopefully we will start protecting it more, restoring it more, rewilding it more, and so on. So that was my theory of change. And actually just right before we were recording this session, I found actually a new report, and they had like a really amazing statistic. It was saying 85% of the most valuable companies, so that's the S&P 1200, 85% of them, they're dependent on nature to a severe extent. So if nature were just like collapse now, 85% of the most lucrative, most profitable businesses that we have, where tons of people are investing in and funds are going into and so on, these will all collapse if nature would if biodiversity would crumble. And we do a lot of it in order to make that happen, unfortunately, right now. So we just like really play with fire when it comes to the biodiversity situation. And so even if you're just looking from a strictly financial point and only care about your balance sheet or your shareholders, that is a massive risk for you as a company.
Welcome to Nature Is, where we brainstorm, share innovative ideas, and have conversations to stir our spirits and elevate our actions for a better world.
Oliver Dauert, founder of Wilda, thank you for joining us and welcome to Nature Is. We're thrilled to have you joining from Biarritz, France, to tell us about your work.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, really pleasure. Thank you so much for the invite. Looking forward to this.
So with that, let's jump in. Oliver, mental health is really the entry point that you've taken to addressing the biodiversity crisis. Why don't we begin by having you describe the connection between mental health and nature and the role that Wilda is playing in making this connection?
Yeah, for sure. So when I was like starting to dig in, I'm always a big fan of like trying to figure out what is the root problem of everything. Because my theory looking into nature is if you tackle the root, then hopefully you can really create systematic change. A lot of people always throw out that word. And so I always try to explain like how I think mental health is tackling that. And for me, it was really this disconnection to nature. For me, we are disconnected from nature. If we look in our cities where most people live, you rarely see nature. Nature is not really a daily part of your life. And so it just got normal that we get more and more disconnected from nature. The problem with that is that you have less emotional attachment to that. And if you have less emotional attachment, then what we see is that it's easier to destroy. Now, my theory was if we can reconnect people to nature, we have a stronger bond to nature, more emotional attachment, makes it much harder to destroy because we actually start caring for it. And hopefully we will start protecting it more, restoring it more, rewilding it more, and so on. So that was my theory of change. And I was looking for a vehicle for that because in the end, nature connection, how do you do that, has been done a bit before. The spiritual route apparently didn't really work, didn't resonate with, let's say, the critical mass of people. But what is something that we all have in common? What is something that we all have challenges with? And I think that is mental health. It is something that is still flying a bit under the radar and not as popular to talk about as physical health. But I think mental health is definitely something that through our lives, it's just life doesn't go straight. We all have our challenges to face. So sooner or later, we all face our challenges. And personally, I always fell back on nature. Nature always got my back when I had like mental health challenges. So I thought like, hey, why don't combine those two? For me, those two go really hand in hand like burgers and fries. I think they really make a lot of sense, but hasn't really been done a bit before. And the second thing that I want to say there is a bit the theory of change was that, so because our head is not really straight and we have like challenges mentally, we destroy our base of living. And because we destroy it and we create like such a toxic environment for us, we have mental health challenges. So again, it's like a bit this vicious circle. And so I thought like, hey, let's try to combine those two. So that's what we try to aim with Wildya.
Well, I think it's incredibly effective. And the motto that you've attributed to the business is transform your eco-anxiety into action, which I think is such a helpful entry point for so many people. And I've started taking the courses on the app and really encourage others to do that too. We'll include this in the show notes. And I appreciate the format and the content and the actionable ways that you're really helping people to reconnect with nature, because to your point, I think we have been distanced over time, and our digital worlds only increase that. So tell us more about the name Wildya and also how the app is helping to accomplish this reconnection.
Yeah, with pleasure. So the name is quite simple. I always loved the word wild. For me, it's just like as soon as I hear the words, magic is happening. Even if I'm in a bustling city like Berlin or Istanbul or Sydney where I lived, whenever I had just like wild and I was closing my eyes, I had like image of nature and vibrant and I don't know, wildebeest or emperor penguins swimming and so on. So wild, this word that does something to me. So I definitely knew wild needs to be in there. And we want to wild people. So I thought like wild yourself. Okay, that's cool. And then I was like, I wanted to create an homage to Australia because Australia was the first country where I spent like really lifetime in. And that was after my high school and it really transformed my life. So I thought like, I want to give a homage to that really important chapter in my life. And so instead of saying you, I used ya, because yeah, it's often like see ya and so on. It's something that the Australians really like to use. And so I thought like, hey, sounds catchy too. Nice story. I'm gonna go with that one. So that's where the name is coming from. And that what we do, yeah, as you said, like we try to transform eco-anxiety into action because in the end, we currently, see like three things. Basically, the majority of us have two reactions to, let's say, the nature and the climate crisis. Either they're looking away or they are just like frozen by the sheer task at hand and just like paralyzed because in the end, there's so many things that need to be done. And it can just be very overwhelming. And only a small group of people, they're actually fighting. So very similar to what we see in nature. When you look at into the animal kingdom, they often have like three reactions: flee, freeze, and fight. And so we thought like, hey, let's try to get more people from this flee and freeze state into, let's say, the fighting stage of like where they can be kind of an active voice and like in activism and policies in their jobs, in their families, in their communities. And yeah, that is unfortunately not a straight route. And so, yeah, as you said, we currently try this through courses and daily actions, and we take 15% of our revenue to protect and restore nature. So just by showing up for your own mental well-being, you also do something automatically for nature. And all the courses are inspired by nature. So again, nature is kind of the big storyteller there. But to be honest, we are right now working very hand in hand with our community and with the first users of the app. And we realized there's so much more to do and there's so much more to be done and so many more angles that we didn't think of or where people face problems. So there's a lot of changes coming in the next weeks and months, how the app is going to look like. And it's very exciting. It's very, very confusing time right now as well, because we challenge like everything, but it will still go in that direction of like mental health and nature. It's just like we want to do an even better job of how we help people, because we realized, not everybody's brain is obviously working. We face the same challenge, but everybody's kind of reacting differently to it. And so we need to find different ways of helping people. So that's what our homework is right now.
Well, I think that's a very natural place to be as a early stage business. And the most important thing is that you have released it into the wild for others to react to, and that's how you learn. But I will say personally that, it's such a overwhelming issue for people to access, and you've done a great job of just helping to make that bite-sized and accessible, which is not an easy feat at all. So well done, and I know that others no doubt find that reassuring. And on that point, Oliver, you've been so generous with your knowledge, and one of the ways that I actually discovered your work was through the open source approach that you have to resources. So the Wild cheat sheet, Biodiversity 101, and more. So firstly, thank you, because I think this is such an accessible point of common language with credible sources for so many people to use. But with this in mind, are there a few basic but relatable facts that you think would be helpful for businesses or individuals as they try to understand the biodiversity crisis and the need to care about this in their daily lives or business models?
Yeah, no, that's, I think, a very good question. I do all of this because in the end, I just see that there's like still a bit of a complicated topic for a lot of people, even though we are all like coming from nature. The topic of nature and even the term biodiversity, it's some like it's normal if you are like an ecologist, zoologist, marine biologist. These kind of terms sound normal to you, but to be honest, I never studied that field, and so as an outsider, I realized, no, we need to speak like much simpler terms, that we really need to make knowledge more accessible, because only if people understand like how important it is for their own well-being and for our general well-being as a society and as a species, only then they can start to act. So that's why I do all of that stuff and try to be really vocal about this. So let's start with businesses, because to be honest, that's exactly the reasons why I didn't study zoology, ecology, marine biology, because I really wanted to study that. I actually studied business because exactly for that reason. In Australia, I realized that, for me, at least in my analysis, that companies have a huge impact on the natural world, and they are the main driver of destruction. So they could also be the main driver of regeneration. So I thought like, hey, I need to understand how everything works. And so let me try to answer to businesses first, like why they should care about. Actually, just right before we were recording this session, I found actually a new report, and they had like a really amazing statistic. It was saying 85% of the most valuable companies, so that's the S&P 1200, 85% of them, they're dependent on nature to a severe extent. So if nature were just like collapse now, 85% of the most lucrative, most profitable businesses that we have, where tons of people are investing in and funds are going into and so on, these will all collapse if nature would if biodiversity would crumble. And we do a lot of it in order to make that happen, unfortunately, right now. So we just like really play with fire when it comes to the biodiversity situation. And so even if you're just looking from a strictly financial point and only care about your balance sheet or your shareholders, that is a massive risk for you as a company. So that's, let's say, from just a purely company perspective. Let's say from an economical perspective, and let's zoom out, numbers are showing us that 50% of the entire economy are medium to highly dependent on nature. Now that is, again, a very heavy number. So if you just imagine like COVID was impactful for our economy, now just imagine 50% of our GDP just like starts falling off. That would be like a much, much, much bigger issue. So we would have recession on our hands, famines, and so on. So yeah, very big issue just from a numbers perspective. All right. So businesses should care about this from, let's say, from that perspective. From policies are changing, then customer trends are changing. So opportunities are opening up. So if you're actually moving, biodiversity is still flying a lot under the radar. So not really as much as like, for example, climate. There's already like a couple of companies that start to do things, not so much on biodiversity. So if you actually are running ahead of your competition in that area, then you can also set yourself apart. So even from a really narcissistic perspective, businesses should definitely look into nature positive and the journey towards that, and going beyond sustainability, but really regeneration. So that's my appeal to companies. And when it comes to individuals, I always try to ask the person in front of me a bit like what they care about and who am I talking to, because in the end, we're all very different and we have different motivators. What's very important for us. In a nutshell, I would just like to say there are ecosystem services. So basically, the forest, the coral reefs, they all fulfill certain roles. And we as humans, we benefit from this. And so far, we never had to pay for that. Nature was just like doing it for us. So what does nature, for example, do for us? So where your food is coming from, your water, your air, if you go on a nice trip. So if you like to travel, if you are in need of medicine, or you have family members that are in need of medicine, a lot comes from nature. So there's like so many spirituality. So there's so many connections in our daily lives that are just like nature is the basis of everything that we do. So let's try to take care of that, because if we remove the base of our life, then again, even from a selfish perspective, we as a society, we as families, we as communities, we as individuals will suffer from it. So let's take better care and be better guardians.
I couldn't agree more. And I think so much of what you're describing is this role of being a translator. And even if I put on my former hat as a chief sustainability officer for many years in different companies, this is still something that is not well understood for most businesses. And I've seen similar reports around the dependencies of nature and the extraordinary costs that come to businesses if there is a collapse of any kind of biodiversity or nature related ecosystem. And so I think the connections that you're making through your accessible resources helps to bridge that divide, because we have the scientists and the ecologists, the biologists, business people, the policy people, and now we all need a common language from which to speak. And then with that, hopefully one can kind of begin to act and figure out what that translation looks like for individuals and for businesses. What do you believe is needed to help Wildya scale? And is that with businesses, or is it with individuals? What can the broader community do here to help you advance this important work?
Yeah. No, at the beginning, we thought like immediately that could be very interesting obviously for companies to boost their employees, because in the end, basically it's two areas that they usually try to improve on. So mental health of their employees plus doing something good for the environment. So initially we thought like, hey, let's go directly and let's talk with companies. What we realized, however, is that we need to first like really create a solution that helps individuals, because let's be honest, the company is not going to support you for long if the employees are not using it, if it's not useful for the employees, and so on. And so we took now more the approach, let's really focus first on B2C, really focus on helping individuals first. And when we have that better figured out, then we will try to get more towards companies and get them on board, because I still believe this is a really interesting intersection that we're sitting on, and that both these kind of perspectives are desperately needed. We need more nature perspectives and we need more mental health perspectives in companies. So still on the line. So how people can help. One is to download the app, be part of the community, and just tell us what is wrong with it, what your problems are, what your ideas are, how we can make it better. That's number one right now, because I quit my job for this. I quit my job because I was like, I can't be complicit, let's say. I can't keep on just like going to work and not like tackle the biggest crisis of this world, and at least in my opinion. I quit my job for this idea, because I really believe that this tackles the root. And so the last thing that I want to do is sell trash to people and just like, just try to convince them and be like a sales shark and just like sell something that is not true. So I really need people to help me in like, what works for you, what doesn't work for you, and so on. So that's number one. And second is, with all these kind of ideas, is we are highly impact driven, and we're doing this all for nature and for people. And the problem with that often is a bit like it's tricky to get financing for that. And so if people know about like competitions, grants, angel investors, family offices, very, very, very impact-driven VCs, then I would love to chat, because let's be honest, the tipping points are unfortunately approaching. We have unfortunately a bit of a time issue, so we need to get things moving for nature. And so money helps in that regard, is that you can just get more people on board and can scale. I
think the employee engagement piece is a really accurate point, because now there's such a limited divide that we have between work and life. And so even just that accessible education, people beginning to understand the impacts of nature and the benefits of nature, I believe, slowly infiltrates into one's work presence as well. So well done. And just to come full circle to the mental health piece, are there examples that you can give? We're hearing more and more in the news about prescriptions for time in nature, things like forest bathing and others. But knowing that, again, this was the entry point for you personally, are there any other examples that you have of the ways that this time in nature or little exercises that people might do that you've seen to improve mental well-being?
Yeah. No, so there's books about it, there's research about this. I think one of the most prominent researches that I find is like quite useful for individuals to understand is like they did a study, and already like 2 hours in an entire week of nature can help you with your mental health. So it can already help you to be less stressed, reduce your blood pressure, become more creative, and so on. So 2 hours, if you break that down, that's really not a lot. But I'm always personally a fan of like micro steps. So if you currently, nature doesn't play any part in your life, literally going out for 1 minute or 2 minutes, really set the bar very, very low, but just go outside and just like try to not be on your phone, and just like look out for something in nature. I know sometimes in some cities it can actually be a challenge, but like try to find a bush or like a walk in a park, or a river maybe, or just a patch of wildflowers maybe in the, or sometimes it's a pigeon. So look out for nature, and just being in nature, like even if it's for 5 minutes, you will see that it will do something with you. Now, on a personal level, that already, like if you try to incorporate that every day, then you will start to see some differences. I've seen it with my life, I've seen it with other people's life. And as with every habit, like try to stack it on something that you do anyways. So maybe you commute. So when you come from the metro, you try to go a bit longer path throughout the park maybe. Or if you realize you have some time that you need after your morning coffee, then after your morning coffee, go out for 5 minutes. But just incorporate that a bit into your daily life. That will already like make a huge change. And then, then there's other things that you can do, like start to read more about this, start to watch like some animal documentaries. So whatever you're into, if it's like reading, if it's like craftsmanship, if it's like watching things on Netflix, just like try whatever you do to find maybe an angle how you can incorporate nature to this. Even if you're on social media, by now there's awesome social media channels that educate yourself about nature. So if you're scrolling in bed and you know you shouldn't do it, then at least try to look out for some animal reels, and that will slowly will hopefully get you to be a part in this wild movement.
Many of the videos and images that you post, I think, very much fall into that category. So we encourage people to follow you there, because you've got great footage, and it's just when you take a step back, you realize what a amazing world is all around us, and we've just kind of gotten away from that in our modern societies and our digital landscapes. We should ask you a little bit about your work as a certified safari guide in Africa. This is such an interesting piece of your background. Do you have any little tidbits to share with everyone?
Yeah, so that came from my perspective, a bit from my imposter syndrome, talking again about mental health. Like, to be honest, I love nature since I'm a child, but in the end, I never got like something very, I never got a certification or never got like a university degree and so on. And I just knew myself, and I was like, oh, should I do like a bachelor's or master's on the side and about like zoology, ecology and so on. And I was just like, that's not me. I just can't do it again. I was really not a university person. I'm much more of a practical learner. So I was like, what exists out there so that I can actually learn a lot about ecology, about like how everything is interconnected, the web of life, about different species, but in a way that works for me. I love I always loved Africa. So for me, it was like quite clear as soon as I found this safari guides training, which is, you can do it for 1 or 2 months. It was like perfect because basically what you do is you just like in a camp somewhere in the bush in Africa. And literally for that 1 or 2 months, you learn 24/7 about nature, about the bushes, about how the geology shaped the soils, and then the soils created like different plants, and because of the different plants you have different animals there, and it's just like so it's just an amazing experience. And to talk a bit about like if people really want to hear some stories, is like, yeah, I mean, you sleep right next to those animals, there's no fence, so your lunch is crushed by some elephants that start to walk into the camp. Or like I was on a phone call with my fiancée, and in the middle of the call, I had to tell her, sorry, my dear, I needed to go on this truck here because right now there's lions going to the water hole, and the water hole is like 50 meters from our camp. So to be comfortable, I'm just going to sit in that truck to keep on having the conversation with you. Or falling asleep and listening to lions or hyenas, or like a buffalo scratching on your tent with their horns. So it's just like, it sounds surreal because, yeah, as I said, like so many of us, we live very remote from nature, or very excluded. We shut ourselves off. And so, yeah, when you're in Africa and you live in this kind of tents, you just like, there's no barrier between you and nature. And I really, really appreciate that. So if you have the means, then definitely check that one out. If you don't have the means, there start to be a bit more movements around that, also like in Northern America and Europe and Asia and so on. So you don't always have to go for such an expensive or like long trip. There's like mini initiative, as you said, like forest bathing or rewilding work, or probably in your area. You Google for 5-10 minutes, and otherwise write me on LinkedIn. Happy to connect you. There's like awesome things happening.
Yeah, I think even in many communities, at least in the US, there are iNaturalist trainings that are very much specific to one's local ecosystem. And just what you've described, I think at the heart of that is that you found something that worked for you. It wasn't about taking a biology class or an ecology class. It was actually about being in nature and learning in a way that felt organic to you. So hopefully that's an inspiration to others. And on that note, Oliver, always our last question, which we really try to ground in nature. And I know that's something that you appreciate too. Can you name some of your mentors in the natural world and tell us why?
That's like, it's putting me on a really hot seat, whatever I'm going to say here. So let me start with this, because that's the easiest one that comes directly to my mind. Is like, my biggest mentor has been nature itself, and have been especially wildlife. So I love everything in nature, and you shouldn't have favorites. I like fungi, I like plants. But to be honest, like my heart is really with especially wildlife. I just like love animals in all kind of shapes, but even there, I have like mammals. I find mammals like are really cool, and sharks. So a huge inspiration and mentor has been really nature itself, because quite often it just has guided me in some way. And I don't mean that that's necessarily in a spiritual way or anything like this, but it was always whenever I had like troubles, or whenever I was lost, I needed to shut off, or whenever I needed some new ideas, I found that usually in nature. So nature itself and the different species, elephant, lion, honey badger, and so on, they've been my number one mentor. And then the list goes on and on and on. Of course, there's like let's say the famous people that people know, like David Attenborough, like his documentaries, his books are incredible. Chris Tompkins, to be honest, is just a powerhouse. I love her way of thinking, very pragmatic. I think we need much more of that, very solution oriented, and not just hope, but do something, because if you act on it, you create hope for others, and you will create hope for yourself. So just love that. But then also, like, let's say a bit less famous people, but people that at least a bit more known in, let's say, our space is Kane Blythe, I think, is like a great individual. He wrote a book on rewilding that's helped me a lot to look beyond sustainability and look beyond protection and conservation, but really look in how can we create those ecosystems and fix what we have broken. And I found that kind of movement very, very inspiring. And he's kind of one of the leaders of that. So I would say Kane has been a huge inspiration. Belinda does something a bit similar to that in policies, and especially ocean policies. So Belinda has been a huge inspiration. Yeah, how long she's been already doing that, and especially like fighting for the ocean, because within biodiversity, we rarely look at the ocean. So biodiversity is often looked at, especially on land, because that's something that we can see and where we can see the changes and so on. And ocean is, to be honest, still a very wild, wild west, and things are going on because they happen out of sight, out of mind, So Belinda, I would say, and then there's so many. Steve Irwin, for example, I just loved his like enthusiasm. So I tried to get that one a bit more going. That's people just like, I loved his, like, whenever he was talking about different animals, or when he was showing them, you could just like see how much he cares and how much he loves them. And that really stayed with me. And since then, since I saw him, and since I became a bit more confident of who I am and who I want to be, I'm less and less hiding that side of me. Because for a long time, I felt like Steve Irwin, like inside of me, and wanted to show this, like, look at that plant and look at that insect, like super excited. And I just never did it, because like socially in my surrounding, either at work or at my friends or in my community, it was like there was nobody like that there. And so I thought like I can't be that person, and I have to hide myself and things like this. So Steve Irwin, just like from a passionate perspective, yeah.
So many mentors, and Oliver, I know you're too modest to suggest that, but I know you are also becoming a mentor to many people, and the work that you're doing is really highlighting so many important points and making this world accessible to people that probably would have not have had that on-ramp. So thank you for infusing the mental health aspect, for really thinking about the ways that we can engage individuals in practical ways in their daily lives, and keep up the great work.
Still very, very new to me to hear these kind of things, and I try to get better in accepting also kind words, because I still feel like I'm only starting, and there have been like so many people before me and people that do like much better job, but just that I'm a bit like the voice, as you said. I'm a bit like a translator, so I see myself a lot in this translation space. So yeah, thank you for the kind words, and thank you for the opportunity to talk to you and talk to your audience, and hope it was helpful for people.
Absolutely. Thank you, Oliver, and keep up the great work you're doing in the world.
Thank you, Laura.